pleasure of to my colleagues is I've had the pleasure of listening to you twice, mate, but only in a video conference.
Oh, well, this is the real thing, Zelda.
Okay, good morning. We might get started. It's actually really lovely to see everyone here today. There's some, usual suspects. We always tend to meet each other at events like this, so it's lovely to catch up with you. Today, I'm actually extremely excited and also a little bit nervous because not only do I have some of my dearest colleagues in the room, but we also have Professor Stephen Heppell here with us. So because I knew I'd get a little bit nervous, I thought I'd actually just write something down. And by write, I mean type. So during the next few years, we know that Queensland education is going to go through some major changes, and it feels like we're actually always going through some major changes. But certainly there are going to be two big impacts, and one we all know is the national curriculum starting from next year, and the second one is that transition of Year 7 into high school. So these two influences are going to provide us with a fantastic opportunity to look at our learning space design, to look at the way that we deliver our curriculum, to look at the resources that we have on the ground, and also that beautiful synthesis between pedagogy, our technologies, and our physical spaces. So this particular opportunity is going to be explored further today as we welcome to Queensland one of the world's foremost experts on contemporary learning, Professor Stephen Heppell. Professor Heppell will explore the main design challenge for future classrooms, providing a balance between the needs of learners, creating functional, flexible spaces that can adapt to evolving pedagogies and digital technologies, and providing a safe, comfortable, inspiring learning environment. I think I use this example quite often because it's the one that's most prevalent in my mind, and that's the spaces of Deb Cox and Stanthorpe State School and how she's successfully done that. And I think some of that work is on the Learning Place or Smart Classrooms website, and it's an absolute tribute to that particular mode of thinking and working. Schools globally, though, are rethinking learning spaces and moving away from that kind of industrial model that, in fact, we're sitting in today, funnily enough, and looking at new paradigms for learning. And it feels like, again, we've been probably having the same or similar conversation for the last 8-9 years, but certainly with opportunities like the national curriculum and like Year 7 moving into high school, these are changes that, may not happen for another generation. And so this is an opportunity that I don't think we can afford to let slip by. So State Library welcomes you to this forum today and hopes that this event challenges your thinking, inspiring you to go back to your schools or to your institutions with a refreshed vision for the future of education. State Library is also re-looking and revising our learning offer to our formal and our informal learners. So your feedback today is greatly appreciated, and as part of today we will send out some correspondence afterwards, and in that will be a bit of a SurveyMonkey link where you can let us know what your thoughts are. And of course all of that thinking helps us guide our programming, and it also helps us with our funding, so we would greatly appreciate your feedback. A couple of housekeeping notes for you. So the bathrooms are just outside as you leave the auditorium. Tea and coffee and some snacks will be on the Queensland Terrace where you just were at 11 a.m. today, and that'll go till 11:30. And then we're going to be heading back in here at 11:30, and this is your time then. So the floor will be open to you for the next hour, so from 11:30 to 12:30, where you can ask Stephen those questions that you've been dying to ask, or some clarification on what Stephen spoke about earlier on today. And of course, we're hoping that morning tea time will certainly generate some of that conversation and some of those questions as well. If you're twittering today, our Twitter feed is at @SLQ_learning. And we hope that you have a fantastic morning. Today will be podcast as well, so you'll be able to find the podcast on the website, and we'll send you a link to that as well. So now, without further waiting, I'd like to hand over to Professor Stephen Heppell. Thank you.
Thanks. Gosh, and it's good to see so many friends and familiar faces. I'm curious that quite a few of you I've Skyped to or podcast to or videoed to, but it's actually nice to see you in the flesh, so to speak. I turned out to be older and fatter than I look in videos. So it's a bit of a disappointment, really. You know. This, I've never put that on a platform before. I was looking, Ken Jewell and I, we go back 30 years or more in terms of work we've done together. I was rummaging through some of the files on my laptop, looking for some stuff we did a long time ago, and I found this. This was somebody sketched it as a summary of what I said in a conference. It was just lovely. So I'll put that. Anybody wants it, I'll email it to them. Pleased to have found it. Really, I'm excited to be here, particularly because this is such a gorgeous building. Just absolutely blew my socks off when I came in the door. And we were just reflecting, most civic pride spaces are very vertical. You know, they're sort of, you go into the cathedral in Salamanca, it goes up as near as they can get to God. You know, it's sort of thing, it goes whizzing up. You know, what's stunning about this place is it's horizontal. In every room you get into, your eyes just go on for miles, and it's just the most gorgeous place. And I suppose whenever we're designing learning, that sort of sense of me, we, and see is dead important. My bit, the private bits that are, the bits that I'm doing on my own, the bits that we're doing together that are, our sort of part, and the bit that we celebrate for the world. And this building does me, we, see probably better than anything I've seen for a long time. The little sort of private spaces, the little installation spaces with their incredibly tall ceilings, and the sense of mutuality and collegiality in the little breakout rooms but the fact that those rooms are by the water, so you get a sense of who you are in the room, but who you are in terms of the region too. It's just very clever. And I'm going to come back to me, we, see lots during this morning. What have I been doing lately? Actually, in truth, I'm having the time of my life at the moment. It's really, I like recessions. Bring them on. They're fab. Because your economy hasn't gone down the tubes like ours, you've missed out on some great opportunities. Our economy's in a big mess, and probably that's probably it's a curious thing. But I think what happens, when money gets tight, and your money's getting tight too, I know, you're just not quite in the same meltdown that we're in anything like, and good politicians and good natural resources have saved you, really. But when money gets tight, people look at education, particularly at learning, and sometimes they say, let's go back in time a bit, let's do it the way we used to do it. We have a Minister of Education who's currently making a strong case for Latin in the classroom again, which is, there are some advantages for Latin, but in a world where we're struggling to retain our creative industries because they're going to go to some other country, Latin probably isn't the thing that's going to make them stay. And that sense of let's go back in time a bit, I've seen Happy Days, it looked quite good fun. Let's take schools back to there. Because it doesn't work, because the economy is moving forward so fast, and we'll return during the morning to what employers are looking for. And then other people approach that tight money thing with a sort of a productivity model, which you've had a bit of that here, where they say, okay, money's tight, let's try and standardise things, let's go for standardised testing. What were they thinking? And let's ask teachers to do a little more for a little less, and let's try and we've got the people that designed McDonald's stores and some of our retail parks looking at the design of schools at the moment and saying we could build schools a lot cheaper if we did them like McDonald's. Yep, you could. True, but ... And I think that productivity model always plateaus. You get a little gain and then it all fades away. It's what will happen with your standardised testing. You'll get 18 months of improvement, then everything will plateau. Then you'll get a couple of whole scale cheating scandals, and then because 50 years of social science research around the world has told you what you're going to get. So don't be surprised. And then it'll all, the sun will come out and rainbows will be everywhere, and you'll go back to doing all the fabulous things you've been doing for the last 30 years or so. But So if productivity isn't going to get you there, and going back in time isn't going to get you there, the only thing that is going to get you there and get anybody there is doing it differently. If we can't go backwards and the productivity model isn't going to take us forwards, how might we make learning a little better? Doing it differently is how, and that's my life really. So that's what we're going to tiptoe around today, how we do it differently in design terms. But you don't just design a better car, if you haven't got motorways and drivers and road signs and a sense of why you need to travel, nothing happens. And I do think, looking around the world, the world is in a bit of a mess for sure at the moment, and you have to look at the kind of stuff we're all embroiled in together in Afghanistan and so on. But for the price of one soldier in Afghanistan, yours or ours, I can build 10 schools a year, every year. And I guess if somebody had given you maybe a tenth of what we've all spent between us in that one country and said, look, see if you can mend it with learning, I bet we could have done. So I think we're at a really interesting stage where a lot of the world's problems can be fixed with learning. And the nice thing about that is that we couldn't fix them with the learning we had before. Just building big traditional Western industrial scale schools wasn't going to fix West Africa where the adults have all run away or died of AIDS. It wasn't going to fix parts of the world where girls can only learn in secret in the back room. But doing learning differently could maybe fix all those problems. And you've seen, and I've seen, places in the world where we've been able to just, how can I put it? We just inoculate children against poverty with a little bit of learning. So I think that's what we can do. So we've got a fun morning ahead of us, and we're going to look at just how playful and really rather seductive learning might be, and what fun it might be. But somewhere at the back of all that, we're not just doing that to fix children here, or here in Australia, and the bigger here, or here in the southern hemisphere, but probably here on the planet. So it's a good time for us professionally. I think nice time. So what am I doing? Blimey. Well, some of that. Let's have a look at here's some of me. I'm having a lot of fun. I'm declared war on school furniture, and rightly so. Well, I've got a very slight hum going on here. I don't know if are you getting that? Slightly unnerving, It's well, hopefully it is. But look, this is this is slightly alarmingly. There's a Catholic school in England where I persuaded them to burn half the furniture. They built this enormous bonfire, and they actually torched the stuff on bonfire night, which Catholics, I'm sure know, is probably not the best night to be having a celebration. But it's the only time you can have a really big bonfire in Britain and not the police arrive. So, but when you look at a chair like that, and you say to yourself, so what's that chair for? Well, we've got a crisis of reading in our schools. Kids are really reluctant to read. Do you know, I've been watching children reading quite hard the last half century or so, and I haven't yet seen one kind of go into the dining room in a hotel when they're on holiday and drag a chair down to the beach because they want to read a book. It turns out it doesn't happen. I haven't seen kids take a chair out of the kitchen at home up to their bedroom so they can sit. Because I want to read a book, Mum, and I can't properly settle into it unless my back's good and upright. I don't sort of don't feel comfy. It's not sort of. Kids sprawl and relax, and they loll, and they nest when they're reading. And I haven't seen much lolling and nesting and sprawling furniture in schools, and yet we have a crisis of reading. So a lot of this is about common sense, really. But somewhere in all this, we sort of ditched our common sense when we were looking at learning. I guess there's a moment when people were slapping leeches on people and saying, that will cure you, It's always worked, That there was a sort of collective madness because that's what we'd always done. And so a nice bit of my life is to look at how we might do it differently. I'm working with kids all around the world who are this lad in Thailand who are rushing around, with that sort of researcher badge on, saying, how might we build better learning? And of course, in asking the question, you get that wonderful reflective practice that we'll come to later, and that better learning can be just gorgeous. This is a school in Denmark, in Silkeborg. I'm lucky to be working with the region of Silkeborg on their revisiting learning, although goodness knows what they've got already is pretty good. This is a little school where you walk through the front door, and at the heart of the school is a bread oven. And every morning they put fresh bread in the bread oven, so you walk through the door as a kid and you open the door and the fresh bread smells come out, and just think about what that does to you as a learner. So, and when it's a special day, they put pizza in. And the kids come through the door and they go, way, something's going to happen, I can smell it in the air. It's so simple, Well, our supermarkets have been pumping fresh bread, artificially created fresh bread smells around for ages because they know it makes you feel good. Why don't we do that in schools? It's, when we start looking at what we might do, and of course the joy of all this is to look at what others have done. And this is a classroom I built in West London. We'll be listening to some children from that space later on. And I built that in 2004, which is a while ago now. And I'm building schools this is in the Cayman Islands in the Caribbean, where the schools all got blown down by Hurricane Ivan. Thank you, Hurricane Ivan. Never pass up on a good disaster. You would wish. Well, the teachers had to teach in car parks, and gymnasiums and all sorts of things. And then when we started, we'll come to the Cayman Islands as a case study, perhaps in a minute. It'd be a good route to go. But when we started designing the new schools, they said, just don't put us back in our boxes. That's all we ask. We've really enjoyed this. It's been nice. It's been like a holiday. So we didn't. And we're going to chat to. Well, we're going to look at these kids and see what they've designed out in West London in a bit. This is a group of children who designed the classroom for themselves in Lambton School in West London, where my daughter teaches. And the classroom they designed was so good that this Easter they refused to go home. Easter holidays came, and they came in every day, let themselves in, broke in first of all, then let themselves in properly, and sat in there every day and had no teachers. Now, when learning is so good, kids don't want to go home. You'd start, and I think the thing I'd put on the table at the beginning is I don't know how good kids might be, really don't. 35 years, I don't know how long we've been doing this, Ken, it's a long time, isn't it? Golly gosh, in all that time, kids, when you get it right, kids plus technology equals progress. Kids plus technology and give them a voice and give them a bit of a reflection in all that equals stellar progress. And I don't know how good they can be, but I do know that our vision for children is massively, massively under-ambitious. That world of criteria and referencing we've imprisoned our children in, where we only want you to do as well as the year before, that'll be just fine, In a world where, as well as the year before, isn't going to begin to do, it just robs them every minute of the day. So, when you find a group like this, and this lad here, who, I've known these kids since they were 11, and I had the privilege of connecting to them from Michigan. I was talking to 700 odd teachers in Michigan just back in August in our summer. And I had the slightly risky experience of connecting live by Skype to these students as they opened their exam certificates. And, I knew they were going to be okay, but I cried. I'm not embarrassed to say. Anyway, it's on the video, but I mean, he was predicted straight D's, A's and A stars, Kids that are engaged with their learning, are just astonish us every time. And we were just chatting as he came in, weren't we? And I said probably if you take one thing away from today, it's this simple thought that if we astonish kids with the learning we build for them, they will astonish us back. It really, really is that simple. If you Take one sentence away. That's absolutely all of it, really. So let's look at some of these astonishments. I mean, just to give you a bit more background about myself. I also have an interesting life in new media, so I'm a professor of new media environments as well. That's the door into my office as you sort of come in the morning. And this is somebody's PhD, this Doctor Who. Did you get Doctor Who out here? Yeah. Well, Andrew is writing a PhD where he's taken some of the 1960s episodes of Doctor Who. You've got to be pretty old to have seen those William Hartnell episodes. And he's reshooting them in CGI. And he's taking one of the David Tennant ones, the werewolf one, and reshooting it with 1960s technology in a little tiny room with a clunky old camera on it. I have to tell you, at this stage, the 1960s version of the current one is probably the best. It's really good, it's sort of playful and it feels like you're there. And so, there's a joy in my life in working with new media. I'm a trustee of the BAFTA, so you know about the BAFTA Awards. So I get to go to the BAFTA Awards. This is my wife walking down the red carpet. If you're not very famous, you have to take your own photographs, So then I overtake her. And she gets one of me, it sort of works, That picture's being slightly unkind to her, actually. It's sort of that's being podcast. The screen's gone all wrong, And you'll have seen this movie for sure. I won't play the sound on this, but how many of you have seen this movie? Probably almost everybody nodding. This is Avatar. We had 52 students on the production team of Avatar. That's the most we've ever seen. It's quite an exciting time, that kids are coming out of college and going straight into massively high value, the highest grossing movie of all time. Think how good it would have been with the script, wow, But they just had a narrative. But I do think the visual narrative is breathtaking. The way at the beginning, the way in which the Avatar scene feels like an intrusion. You're watching the movie and you go off into this strange. By the end, you've fallen so into the Avatar world that when they go back into the world of real life, it feels like a break it's just very, very, very clever, visually very clever. So I have a lot of fun with all that, and so on. And then I've got some interesting research projects. We won't bore you with all of these, but this one's been a lot of fun. This is just started as such a gentle project. We thought we'd build a little bit of technology that allowed teachers to stream their teaching from their classroom privately to a small group of others who would follow it with a Twitter feed and just post little private tweets. And so we had young teachers streaming their stuff to retired teachers who would offer them little bits of advice on the craft of teaching, Don't hit him there, it will leave a mark, that sort of stuff, No, I don't mean it, but just a little, what was fabulous about it was that the retired teachers had such good wisdom to offer, but also said, I wish I was back in the classroom. And what you always get with technologies is these unexpected symmetries. You thought you built a channel, but there's always a back channel. And those teachers wanted to start teaching again, and in many cases have. So that's been a lovely little project. And I'm also in the throes of a thing, actually some of you might be involved in yourself, called CloudLearn, which has been sponsored by Nominet, the Nominet Trust, where we're crowdsourcing all the good advice from teachers that are using Facebook in the classroom. If you're going to use a mobile phone in the classroom, there are some things you might do to make it work well. Number one thing is you say to all the kids, get your phones out, put them on the desk. So all the phones are in line of sight. You see where they are, you can see them. Simple stuff, just top tips from 100 teachers who are successfully using phones in the classroom. And I think we're in this lovely world of crowdsourcing good practice. So many creative. We've got this fabulous body of teachers at the moment. Teachers between 25 and 35 all came into teaching here in Europe in times of full employment. They could have done anything they liked. and they chose to teach. Wonderfully, thank you. And that's the best generation we've ever seen in teaching. And then right at the end of their careers, wise old owls, who've been through extraordinary variety of change. They've seen so much change. There was a time in their early careers where annually, massive changes. So they're really up for a bit of change. And put those two together, and you've got the most powerful engine for change, and inform that change with the voice of this really rather brave generation of youngsters. And you really have got an engine that can change the world. But we've only got it for about 10 years. 10 years on, our 25 to 35-year-olds are starting to worry about their pensions. There's nothing to worry about. There is no pension. You're going to work till you're 120. There it is. And the wise old owls have fallen off their perches by then, I guess. So we've got about a 10, 15-year window with the best possible combination of teachers we will ever see in our long lives. And we really want to do something with that. So one of the things we're doing is crowdsourcing all their top tips. The community who are debating how to use Facebook in the classroom. And I'll tell you now, I've seen some of the best careers work I've seen in my life in Facebook in the last 2 years. It's a fabulous classroom tool. Seen some of the best history ever in Twitter. There was a girl following the other day, she'd found her great-grandfather's diary from the First World War. It might have been a great-great-grandfather's diary from the First World War. And she was just tweeting his daily entry. I mean, such a simple thing, But he died in the war, so... somewhere in all this, it just stopped, really powerful. And all the kids that were following those tweets were, who'd become, immersed in his narrative. It was a bereavement, powerful stuff. So these are wonderful tools, and using them, and the whole design of learning ain't no different. If we're not listening to the voice of our extraordinary profession of teachers and this ambition generation of children, there's not a kid on the planet who would want to be only as good as their dad was at 21. They all want to be way past that. And that's giving us some special opportunities. And of course, not just here, but everywhere. So that's my life, really. Well, there's more, but, let's not dwell on it. And, just to sort of reflect, you can barely see that, can you? That's a T-shirt that just says The Classroom of Tomorrow and How to Get There, back from 1993. It's not much better contrast on my screen here, to be honest. So, we've been looking at that sort of future learning space for quite a long time. And, some people think they're there. Look, I've got this here somewhere. Let me just go and have a quick little look for it. Look, some people think that they're there already. I have to share these two with you. I was walking walking through a school in Chicago, and this was last year, and they got this special room for the 21st century. I thought, well, it's 2010. We've been here for a while, If you're a 10-year-old, it's the only place you've ever lived. And so slightly to my dismay, So I was excited. I went in. Wonder what it is. The room was empty, And this one's rather good. This is a university in England. I don't want to embarrass the Birmingham University. But this is their innovation room. And I just love the idea. They've got a special room for innovation. Look, you can see, is that cutting edge or what? But the cracking bit is you've got Timetable. Look, it's got... so you get Timetable for sort of 40 minutes of innovation, and then... that's enough innovation now. I think we'll find the bell's gone. I don't think it's quite like that. And I do think... I'll share this with you as well. I'd rather like this. Look, I was going past a store a couple of years ago, and they were remaindering the Encyclopaedia Britannica for 99p. But you can see this label here. It's just unbelievable. We get knowledge cheap, It's, isn't that a joy? It's like, so the whole encyclopedia for 99p, and they should have bought it, shouldn't they? So, I just think there are some wrong directions out there. I don't want to suggest that all is joy. But let's look at some case studies. Let's look at where people have gone with all this, and we'll pick a couple, and then maybe come back to. Well, let's go to the Cayman Islands because we dipped a toe into there a little earlier. So the Cayman Islands, you would recognise it's just like you. Look, it's lovely. It's just gorgeous stuff. This is the wonderfully named 7 Mile Beach, which I really like the Caribbean. Because that beach is only 5 miles long, and they thought they called it 7 Mile Beach, more tourists would come, So it's just brilliant. So their schools blew down. They had some interesting schools. This is one of their schools. That's the school. That's the neighbours, if you see what I mean, And so they set up a conversation to decide what they shouldn't do. And this was pretty interesting. And in a minute, I'm going to ask you what you think we shouldn't do. What are some of the things we shouldn't do? There's some of the things we do just because they suit us, but they're not necessarily anything about learning at all. So they had this huge debate. Let's look at what they had to say. I'm not going to play it because that would be intrusive, but you can see they were pretty engaged, So what wouldn't you do? What things do we do in education that have really got nothing much to do with learning? Let's be honest for a moment. The door's shut. Nobody's listening apart from the podcast,
Obsession with testing.
Well, the obsession with testing, for sure, is and there's nothing wrong with competition, and learning's got to be good. But the thought that you might test people by putting them in a room for 3 hours, whether or not they're in mid-menstrual cycle, whether or not their dog died, or goodness knows 1,000 other things. I mean, it just is bonkers, isn't it, really? It seems... and the reductionist model of taking everything you know and turning it into a set of multiple choice questions is so, yeah, testing is, in its current form anyway, is pretty duff, I think. The worst thing for me about testing is it's so individual. You go right through the education system, and every other year you open an envelope and take out your exam results and get your test results, and you turn up for an interview, you sit down at the job, you put your best suit on, you kind of, your mum has sorted you out, you sit down and they say, so, what do you like as a team player? And you go, I don't know, I've only been in schools, no idea at all, I play rugby, but that's, give us a job, let's find out, yeah, testing. What else do we do because it's handy rather than useful, Timetable, well, the whole time thing, let's take a group of teenagers and start them simultaneously at 9 o'clock. Because we all know that they all wake up boiling at exactly the same moment, and their physiology kind of kicks in at sort of, first sparrow call. The research is unequivocal. Some kids really, really hit the ground running at 7:30 in the morning. Others are, barely able to speak until about 10:30. It's just maybe later than that. Maybe never, So let's start them all at the same time. And while we're at it, let's ring a bell and make them all simultaneously hungry. That's going to happen. I'm going to ring a bell in a minute. You all eat. Okay, you ready? Let's go. How is that ever going to possibly work? Half of them are sitting there all morning with their stomachs rumbling. I just wish I could get pie. Others have sneaked a pie in during the day and are on their third pie and could honestly keep working right through lunch. I've had enough pies now. Yeah, the whole timetable thing. And stopping and starting and stopping and starting. That around the world kids are well into immersion. New Zealand kids even, but particularly the Maori immersion lot, they're into sort of half-day timetable blocks. You go to Norway, you find kids on one-day timetable blocks. If it's Tuesday, it's maths. And I'll tell you what, if it's Tuesday, it's maths. You're not going to get away with what I call Dick Turpin teaching, a stand and deliver teaching. It's not going to... You can't do it for a whole day. Your legs get tired apart from anything else. Never mind the kids, Do you know what the longest time block is I've come across on a timetable in a secondary school? Have a guess. It was in England. It was in Dudley in England. Dudley. Have a guess. It's longer than 45 minutes. Let's make this like an auction. 3 hours. It's higher than 3 hours. 3 days, it's longer than 3 days. 3 weeks, it's longer than 3 weeks. It was a month, 1 month. And what they do for half a year is the kids do a month at a time, a subject at a time. And they never do it again. It's June, it's biology, and... So what's it? So just think about that for a minute. Do you think the school's done that because they really hated the kids? Or, what's the scenario, you know? We'll make the little varmints suffer, you know. Or do you think they did that because their exam results had gone up? Because when you do a subject for a whole month, you just live and breathe it, and you come to school and you don't... Yeah, well, that's what it is, you know. And by the way, they make a deal with their kids because they do that exam block early. They do it at 13, the exams the kids should be doing it at 16. And they say to the kids, if you get A's or A stars, that buys you off half a day a week between 14 and 16. So if you get a couple of A's or A stars, when you're 14 to 16, there's half a day a week. You can do what you like. I don't mean you can just go off and do bad things, but you can choose entirely. It's not curriculum-based. You can learn drumming, tree climbing, whatever you like, you know. Good luck, you know. And the results are through the roof. Because there's something just mad about, you know, something about having, you know, you're studying history and you've got your head into history and you're looking at castles and the location of castles and robber barons in medieval Europe, and then, you know, and you've done a lot of stuff about castles typically on the top of rocks because it's hard to climb up them, and then the bell rings and you stop and you waste 10 minutes going down the road, and now you're doing geography and you're looking at roche-moutonnées and the sort of central cores of volcanic plugs, but nobody mentions they often have castles on the top because that's history, you know. There's something balmy about this subdivision of information. I mean, curiously, something I'll come back to the Cayman Islands in a moment, you know. How did we get to be here? Something our employers have been asking for, no surprise. In our creative industry have all just got together, published a document that's really, so they banged it on the table of our government and said, if you don't do this with a curriculum, we're just going to take the whole industry and go somewhere else. Really simple. It's where you just Google the document. It's a cracking document. Next to Gen Nesta would get you there at Google. But it includes things like this. You know, it's saying, you know, we want computing and artistic. It's like a sort of William Blake manifesto. You know, it's wonderfully. There's 251 years since Blake died, isn't it? Actually, probably they should have called it the Blake Manifesto. That would have gone well. You know, but what they're saying is, let's get computer science back in. Let's tie it with art. Let's have whole children who are creative, leaping out of our things. And remember that you know what IBM's survey found when they went off to talk to 1,500 CEOs a year ago. They said, what kind of folk are you looking for? Well, they're looking for people who are, you know, who are disruptive innovators. They're looking for people who can change. They're looking for people who are comfortable with ambiguity. Well, you can read the flipping list. I hate being read to from the screen. But, I mean, that's, you know, what most schools do when they find kids who do all this is they expel them. You know, that's like, whoa, you know. They call your parents, you know. He has been disruptive. He wants to change the place. We never know whether he's coming or going, and he's always doing something new. We can't keep up with him, so we're going to get rid of him. You know, for 10 years, I was running a project where we had 1,000 excluded children every year, which we might come back to after coffee. You know, but no surprise that in the end they outperformed the schools that had thrown them out. You know, so it's interesting times. So just tiptoeing back to the Cayman Islands for a moment, where we were. So Flip, you know, they had that argument, and give me a couple of other things quickly that you wouldn't do if you were starting all over again. Yeah.
I like how you've got a box under your desk to put your books,
yeah,
so that the children don't have to get up at all.
Yes, yeah. The sense that the whole thing is contained in a little space and sort of. In Victorian era, they used to cut the books up. They used to cut down the spine with a knife, and they'd pass the page around one at a time. So if you were stuck next to it, if there was a slow reader between you and the start, come on, you know. And I think also that whole sense of you all join hands and step forward together. We're ready, you know. I've never seen a music teacher on the planet who said to a kid, "You can't do your piano grades yet because you're not old enough." You know, it just never happens. You know, I've never seen a footy coach saying, you know, you're so talented, if only you were 17, you know, you'd get a match. I mean, you get to play early. And we don't do that. And was that Piaget? Was he to blame? Well, even he recanted a bit on his deathbed, you know. So read the last things he wrote, and he thought, oh, really, I'm sorry, you know. It's like, yeah, entirely, you know. So in the Cayman Islands, they thought maybe, what should their kids be? And they came up with a kind of interesting list. They said, look, our kids should be these things. You notice it doesn't say punctual or able to eat when told or or able to wee on demand. You know. It is 11 o'clock. You will all go and wee. You know. Yeah, you too. Yeah, no, everybody. No, everybody has to wee on demand. It's a crucial thing, you know. And of course, just in passing, what you get because of that, you get industrial scale toilets. And when you build industrial scale toilets, I mean, the research evidence is damning on the design of schools because of these gas. You know, a school toilet, you walk along a corridor, you open the door, you step into the bullying antechamber as it's been designed, you know, and in there will be cubicles. The cubicles have no privacy because they've got a gap under the door this big, and everybody in the school is carrying a camera. So you've no sooner sat down than the pictures of your pants are all over the internet. You know, and how could you resist that if you were a kid? Of course you would. You know. And we know that 75% of our children in UK schools, and I know the figure is slightly higher in Sweden. I guess it won't be far different here. Try and get through the day without using the school toilets, and the consequences are. Dehydration, and the physiological consequences of dehydration have been, you know, we've only known it for 100 years. Lack of concentration, your tongue swells up slightly, so it feels slightly awkward. The children they find it awkward to speak in the afternoon because of dehydration. So you get stupid children who don't contribute for half the day because the toilets are badly designed. You know, it's not hard to make learning better when we just stand back and say, hang on, if we were doing this with a blank sheet of paper, we probably wouldn't have weeing by command, you know, we wouldn't do that as a... And so the four things they wanted were only these four things. You might think about what does the space look like then that produces children who are critical thinkers, who are problem solvers, who are ICT competent, who are global citizens. Well, it would be wired, it would be connected to the world. It would surprise you. Because if you didn't come in and you weren't faced with the challenge of how do we make learning happen in here, how are you going to problem solve? And of course, the stuff that you got in your pockets will always work. You're not going to sort of come in and... How many of you here use the slide rule? Anybody old enough to have used the slide rule in here?
Too heavy this one,
yes. Yeah. Well, we'll come back to that later on. But there was a moment when any kit you were given was given to you by the school, and it had to be the right kit. Now the kit you've got, what's in your pocket, and it's the right kit because you chose it. The least you might expect is that it works in the school. I mean, blimey, if you've got a phone in your pocket, it works in McDonald's, it works in Starbucks, surely to God it's going to work in the school library. So, you know, you can sense the world scampering along a bit, you know. If I can use YouTube and Twitter in McDonald's, surely I might be able to use them in my industrial scale toilets, you know. What did they want their teachers to be? Well, it was an even shorter list. Look, they wanted their teachers to be these three things. And of course, you know, in the world we're talking about, if you're not adaptable to change, you're going to really struggle, aren't you? That's bizarre, really, because most of our federal and statewide prescriptions for teachers, you know, tell us what teachers ought to be like. They ask for you not to be adaptable to change. I used to sit on a committee with Chris Woodhead, who was formerly our Minister of not Minister of Education, he'd wish, was formerly our Chief Inspector of Schools. And if people mentioned reflective practice, he would leave the room in anger. The thought that teachers might reflect on their own practice was just horrified him. Well, that was the last century. You know, now, if you were advertising for a teacher, if you thought they didn't reflect on their own practice, you wouldn't even appoint them. I mean, that would be... You know. So it's an interesting list, isn't it, for their old Cayman Islands, and we did a whole heap of interesting things, not the least of which was to break up their schools. This was one of their largest schools, which very quickly we broke up into 4 new schools, and well, blimey, we did it in May, and the kids came back and started in them in September, so we didn't have time to name them. So we said to the kids, you better name them, and they chose, look, PACE. And they said, look, our school's called New Horizons. You know, it's pretty cute, isn't it? Our school's called Leading Edge. Interesting, the names kids pick when they go for... This is slightly strange. Our school's called Heritage, but look, embracing the past, shaping the future. You know, rather like this building we're in, I think. You know. notice how they haven't named them after dead people, which is it's a bit radical, really. So it's a school that should be named after somebody who's died. Yeah. Well, look, Flip, the things worked. You know, here was the headline 18 months after we did the work. Grades were up. This is what passes for joy in teenagers in school today. You can see the smiles on their faces, you know. But Flip, they did get better, you know, and they're up a grade and a half in 18 months. Is not bad on a 5-grade system. You know. So let's look at some of the spaces. These were the schools we built, by the way. They were fascinating places. You can see which direction the hurricanes come from on the Cayman Islands but lots of little details. That break in the roofline, that little notch. We had a cultural community committee who went round all over the Caymanian little buildings and cottages and just sketched the little features that said home to them. One of them was that break in the roofline. Caymanian buildings typically do that, and then that angle was quite precise. So we made sure that was in the building. The ironstone cliffs all round the shore of Georgetown, we captured in the walls and so on. So when you walked into the place, this is a gorgeous floor in here, I might say. But what we put down, we had a lot less money. What we did was a resin floor in shades of blue. We mixed up resin and puddled it into the floor, sprinkled glitter into it, and it just looked like the sea. I mean, it's the most gorgeous thing, you know. And big fluffy clouds in the ceiling to capture sound, you know. So our sound deadening panels were cloud-shaped. It was just rather playfully Caymanian, you know. Let's look at some other people's spaces, because that's a big focus of what we're here for. And I'm going to go to the Ingenium, I think, next. And then we've got time for one other before we get into coffee. But this was interesting. Our government set up a project called Classrooms of the Future. This was back in 2000. And they said, you know, if you've got an idea for what a classroom of the future might look like, tell us and we'll fund it if we like it. And of course, they spent a lot of time, as all wise people do, you know, good words here, but they spent a lot of time talking to children about their visions, you know, what it might look like. And I was lucky enough to be part of a little group that won a bid, and we had this vision, which was largely come out of children. We said to kids, what's the coolest thing you've got? And they brought in a heap of cool things, one of which was one of Johnny Ive's mice, you know, an apple mouse. And we thought, that's pretty cute, you know. So it looks a bit like a mouse. It's also quite an interesting engineering structure. The curve, if you put an egg yolk on a dry surface, the curve of the tension of the yolk does a sort of an engineering thing, which is exactly that shape. So we tried to make the building interesting in lots of ways. You know, the narrative of the building is itself fascinating. We had multiple points of focus. You know, you know maybe the rule of 3 of third millennium spaces, which is quite a good one to just reflect on. If I go to learn3k.net, that should take me to a simple rule of 3, really. If you're building a third millennium, it's my rule, you know. Building a third millennium, so that's why I knew where it was. You know, third millennium space, try to not have more than 3 walls, try to have no fewer than 3 points of focus, and make it a place that will house 3 teachers and 3 classes. And, you know, and then there were sort of social behaviours within there as well, like the kids run a, ask 3 then me rule. You don't talk to the teacher till you've asked 3 of your mates for help and so on. But you wouldn't build a whole school like that. But if you haven't got some third millennium spaces in there, I'm not sure how you'd learn about what's coming next. You've got heaps of these in your schools. You're very lucky. You go to Germany, you'll see none, which would give you a very little hope for the future of the euro, I think. Here's multiple points of focus. You know, you can count the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 points of focus. Got its own toilet in the classroom, so children want to use the toilet, they just use it and carry on. There's 2 toilets, actually. When we said to the kids, they also want a toilet, they said, you better build 2 because it's Eric. We don't know what he does in there, but he's in there for an awful long time. You know? So can we have 2? You know, fair enough. I didn't like to ask. You know. Oh, and by the way, you know that open aspect there, it has to last for when we get these shocking winters. But you see how the outside space that the inside just flows into in a really nice sort of way, and enough ceiling height to be interesting. And that was our artist's impression of our dream of what it might all be like. With, oh, wouldn't it be lovely? We know what artist impressions are like. So then we because it was me, we sat down with a firm of boat builders and had a bash at building the things. And we built them in Richmond on Thames, west of London. But look, they came out pretty good. You know, we were pleased. Yeah, they look pretty good from the outside as well. They just sort of parachute down onto a space. Kids do the artwork. That's not graffiti. That's meant to be. You know. And they're nice. You know, very affordable. Once you'd made the moulds, they're pretty cheap because you're just fiberglass moulding them. Really, it's a cheap thing. Making the moulds was really expensive. It cost us £500,000 to make the moulds, but then we could replicate them pretty quickly after all that. And you know, well, let's just have a quick look inside them for a moment. We'll hear from some children in them. So you have a quick look around. So this was a long way back, you know. You could float, yes, yeah, you could, you know. £10 learning voyage, you know. You'd probably get a lot of takers at the moment, to be honest. You know, I'd paddle mine, you know. The kids named it the Ingenium. They had a competition to name it. It's a lovely name, I think. So inside you can see these are just plain, not quite just plain whiteboards. The whiteboards have a memory. So whatever you write, the building retains a memory of what's going on inside it, which is quite nice, you know. This was the launch day, so it's not a typical day. It's full of people in suits, you know. But you get a sense of, we built a primary one and a secondary one, and you just get a sense of, I love these kids just sort of kneeling down here writing a few words for posterity, you know, just I was there. And this kid just sort of sitting here doing his little podcast quietly. But you see the way the alcoves also were storage. There's bag storage in here, seating. So it felt to the children as though it was a bigger space. Let's hear from the kids. What's it like then to be teaching and learning in a space like that? Well,
and this is what our project is about. And it's basically a classroom. It's called Classroom of the Future. And it's in our school. It's like an ordinary classroom, but it's much bigger and it's much more spacious, and it's a lot different in some ways, but even though we still have ordinary everyday lessons inside it. Basically, students were asked what kind of learning environment they would like to work in, and that's what they came up with. So you've got wide open doors, you've got the colour, you've got all the space, and you don't get the teacher-student barrier anymore. It's kind of broken down and they work together, whereas in classrooms the teacher's telling you what to do and you're reading from the textbook. This is more, you discover your ideas and you're learning your own way, and students can adapt to it so well. It's a better environment to learn in, and you're more open and confident, and you're learning from each other as well as the internet or books.
they're pretty spectacularly articulate, aren't they? I mean, it's worth 30 seconds just seeing the project they were engaged in, which is quite interesting. They'd been looking at.
Stephen, it's not as soft and cosy as I might have expected it might have been. With the furnishings, what was the reason?
Yeah, two things. I mean, one is it's a shoes-off space, and I'm a huge fan of shoeless learning, which we'll come back to after coffee, but I will persuade you to go away and take your shoes off in learning, I promise you. But you've got all the seating in those little alcoves, which work pretty well. But before coffee, I'll show you the space that the kids designed in West London for themselves, and you'll see that's a lot softer and it's a lot more multi-height and it's a lot more FF&E focused, perhaps. So I think this was a soft, in the context of the building, the school it was in, which was a very harsh 60s, quite concretey sort of school. The kind of roundness and the colour and the softness of the design worked well. But, yeah, I wouldn't, I mean, that was 2004. I wouldn't have put that furniture in it if I was doing it now, that's for sure. Quick glance at their project.
The reenactment of Brighton Lock. We chose to do
Stunning use of, it's just green screen is a natural part of the classroom, and it has a Skype bar to talk to other schools, as you'll see in a number of others. Let's go quickly to two other things before we get to coffee. We get slightly lately to coffee, but not too bad. Firstly, let's just have a quick glance at a heap of other people's spaces and just get a sense of just what a rich diversity there is of learning space out. I'll pause at a few of these, but not all. These are those super classes, which we might come and talk about after coffee. 125 children in a primary school class. The quietest and actually the most exciting class I've been in the last 2 or 3 years. Kids all helping each other, 4 teachers, fab. Well, that one just made me laugh. The room was called CO2, and there was an air conditioning unit jammed in the door. That's brilliant. Not all modern design works out well. This was one of my Caribbean schools. If anybody came past, they just grabbed them, pulled their boat up the beach, and said, "Hey, teach us a bit while you're here." This is in Dubai, look at the stars in the ceiling. This is in Alaska. It's a shopping mall being converted over to... Shopping malls make the most fabulous school complexes. They really work. Leave the food hall, bin everything else, This is a little art bus in Denmark that goes round from family to family. This pulls up at the bottom of tower blocks and helps parents remember how to do proper art. They can all do Nintendo Wiis and so on. They've forgotten how to do potato prints and powder painting, and so there's this parks for a week and helps the parents come to terms with art with their children, and it's not bad to be messy. So it's lovely, isn't it? I mean, 10 years ago, I was designing computer buses to show parents how to use computers with kids. Now they know that, but they've forgotten how to do art. This is a more interesting space. It's a corner that children have designed for themselves. That's a stool there, by the way, which is quite interestingly. It's another super class. I'll talk more about that. It's one of the classrooms of tomorrow in that project. This is the entrance to a secondary school where they just dawned on them, perhaps a little late, but at least it dawned on them that, for an awful lot of people, their school experience has not been fab. So when you come back as a parent, and the first thing you're made to do is sit in the corridor outside the head's room, and probably the last time you left school, you were sat in the corridor outside the head's office because you'd done something naughty, and then 30 years later they recreate that experience for you as a way of welcoming you back, So their entrance hall is rather nicely as a kitchen, You come in as a parent, you sit down, you read a paper, you make yourself a cup of tea. This is a fast room, and it has fast broadband. It's got the fastest printers, the fastest computers. It's got fast food. And as a student, you can only linger for 20 minutes, and then you have to move on, which is quite interesting in Blackpool. This is that's High-Tech High in California, project-based heaven. It's all built in the old naval sheds in San Diego. And they do 3 weeks of project-based work, and the school stops completely for 3 days. They walk around, talk to each other about their work. They do a little exhibition. We see, remember? Do a little exhibition. Then they have another 3 weeks of project-based work. And the whole place is entirely decorated with children's work because they've got no money to do anything else. $2,500 per kid per year. The entire education system, which is about a third of what you're on, dollars US. This is a place I was working with where we, as a starting point, we needed to get the community's view of children up because kids were demonised really by the local community. People have often got a down on teenagers. I don't really know why, but people see 7 teenagers together, they think the shop. We've had in England in our shopping malls, we have a thing called the mosquito, which is a high-pitched whistle we put in our shopping malls, which only teenagers can hear, and it's such a high-pitched noise that teenagers, it's designed to drive them out. I mean, it's just a problem because the kids are way too smart. They come in with their phones and they record it, and then they've got a ringtone that their teachers can't hear, which is brilliant, So, ka-ching, So how could you have a down on kids that are that smart, But what we did here, we parachuted an artist in residence into the schools, and we took over the advertising hoardings in the whole town for a month, and we advertised the children. So, as you walk around the town, this was, how good are we, And it just changed hearts and minds overnight. Really, really important. There's no point in even starting unless people think the kids are fab. This is the wonderful Discovery School was lost in the Christchurch earthquake. Not a child was lost in it because, of course, Discovery was built in a shopping mall, and come 105 when the big earthquake hit, the kids were all outside eating because there's no dining room in the school, and the place works like this. The teachers sit there in their little home bases, and the children come to them when they need help. It's a complete reversal of the traditional model. That's just a made-over hut, you know. These are these little inflatable spaces. When you want a little bit of privacy in a large space, you just blow one up. I don't mean that in the Al-Qaeda sense, you know. This is a rather interesting library where even when you've automated the library archiving and so on, you still need that sense. You know, learning spaces are all about community and mutuality and sharing and the sense of belonging. And you get that strongly in a library often from the return books trolley. Just, what are the other guys reading? So this is the return book space, and a lot of the big new library designs are formalising that place where books go back, and they're just quarantined for a moment before they go back into the warehouse, so people can see what the others are reading. And they're lovely. So you get that sort of serendipitous tiptoe through. This is a stress space in a Dutch school when you feel you just really had enough. You just go into this little space, take a deep breath, and move on. And the space is decorated by the drama department, who deck it out with the props from the drama cupboard. And it's an interesting, that's the school itself. I mean, just take a look at the school. So I don't know how you can go into a room that's hanging from the ceiling like that and relax, you know. I guess if you knew nothing of structural engineering, it would be a good chill-out space, you know. But it's an interesting space as a school anyway, you know. This is one of the learning plazas in New Line Academy, where they, in preparation for their new school build, they knocked out walls in their old school. And it's a third millennium space, you know, 3 classes, 3 teachers, multiple points of focus. But when you really want to talk to a group of children intensively and make sure they all hear, nothing better than building these, what they called their bananas, because they built them themselves. And then, you know, if I want to talk to the class, it's just this little, never mind you, it's just a little intimate moment here where we all talk together, which they'd learned from their science lessons. You know, when the science teachers wanted to talk to them, they'll bring their lab stools up and talk. You know, well, one of the things they learned from this, by the way, is how important height is. For height, if you want attention, if you want authority, height. We never designed classrooms; they're always designed in plan. And it turned out that a teacher 1 tier up was significantly more authoritative than on the floor level. You stand at the top, you have the attention of the whole room. If you're presenting to your mates, you know. They were just in the throes of. You have to edit. You have to take this bit out of the podcast, but they were in the throes of an action against one of their teachers for just not being good enough when they opened these plazas. And she's absolutely the star of their plazas now. You know, it turns out that one size fits all doesn't work for our teachers either. You know, if we have a variety of teaching and learning spaces, we get a variety of teachers. Surely to God, that's what we want. And they would have lost it, wouldn't they? You know. This is in Alaska, and as money got tighter, and they thought, you know, our school reception is, you know, I used to have a PhD student in prison, and I used to go and visit him, and it was just like visiting a secondary school, exactly the same procedure, same design, same everything. You know, come through the door, shuts behind you, glass door, get a badge, the next door doesn't open until you've signed in. It was prison, yeah, absolutely identically, you know, probably the same designers. They thought, well, wouldn't it be nicer if the library was the entrance lobby? So anybody comes into the school, they come in through the library. And by the way, like all good school libraries, 1/3 of it's children's work. Why wouldn't you archive your best children's work in... You know, you're not in that criterion referencing world. You don't hide the previous work. You say to the kids, this is what they did last year, and I know you can do better. You know, and if your stuff's good, we'll archive it. It will be in the library. And you don't have a special children's section of crap work, and here's the authorities. You know, it's properly Dewey Decimaled in there with all the rest, you know. Of course it should be. Me, we see. It's about the C bit, you know, it's about celebrating. Here's another, there's the bread oven. This is a lovely playful space, and we'll come back to playful learning for sure after coffee. This in China, you know. Look, it's not 1,000 kids all chanting from a PowerPoint, is it? They're way past that now. This is in Thailand, you know. Isn't that lovely? If you want boys to read, you know, let's build a place where boys want to read. You know? And by the way, the tough books are up the top, you know. This is Spruce House in Boston, in America. You know, not just a third millennium space, but full of little third millennium spaces, little 3-sided, little play spaces inside. That's Macquarie University Library. Look, what a nice piece of furniture. You see how you've got that collaborative space in the middle and individual space on the outside, all in one hit. Lovely. This is a space in the Netherlands designed around the problem of boys fidgeting. I mean, teenage boys do fidget a lot. And they thought, well, perhaps if we build chairs where if they don't fidget, they'll fall off. That will work pretty good. They'll have to fidget to stay on their seats, It's kind of nice, I think. That's one of the many, and I just chatted to somebody here who'd been to visit Hellerup, but you'll have seen a million schools now where the stairwell is the lecture theatre. But the key thing here is, if the children are going to move less, and they are, if the timetable's a month long, you aren't going to be moving every 30 minutes. Why would you spend 25% of the school budget on corridors and stairwells? Why would you spend a quarter of the flipping money on corridors? The kids are never going to move along. And when they do move, they all move together. So why wouldn't they just move through the learning spaces? Golly gosh, and then the stairwells become the lecture. This is just physics, isn't it? You take a large volume and put it through a narrowing, you get pressure and heat and trouble. Every stabbing in a London school in the last 10 years has been in a stairwell, a corridor, or at gates. I mean, every single one. They're points of pressure. Just design it out. It's pedagogically daft, socially daft. Doesn't work for discipline. If you're a naughty kid, the best thing in the world is to get out on the corridors, do a lap or two, and then get into the toilets, into your sanctuary. I can set fire to something, maybe another pupil. And here's Canberra Primary School in Singapore, 3,500 primary school children. And the kids either do morning and lunch or lunch in the afternoon. The teachers do both. Why are the teachers not dead? Well, partly because every young child is paired with an older child. Everybody helps everybody else. We've been almost the last industry on the planet to move forward in this century without a model where the people who are in our world don't help each other. In health, you're all reading stuff on diet and fitness and health. Before you go to the doctor, you already Googled your symptoms, and the minute he gives you a pill, you go straight back, well, hang on a minute, But surely, children should be part of all that. Well, here they are, and children. I was talking to a 14-year-old girl in a school in Kent, where it's a mixed-age school, and the children are all helping each other. And she had been proper naughty in her previous life a couple of years before. And I said to her, well, what's changed? And she had this wry smile about her, Everybody's a social actor sort of smile. And she said, well, it's really hard to be naughty when you're looking after an 8-year-old. So lovely. And, she's right, It's curious, isn't it? And this is a Skype bar in a classroom where the children said, we want softer, lower walls in our classroom, please. Architecturally and also virtually. And we just want to work with others all around the world. Let's rev it up. This is in Liverpool, in Knowsley, where we rebuilt 11 schools as 8 learning community spaces. The day I took this photograph, the Liverpool Philharmonic Orchestra came in and played to an audience of parents who I guarantee had never seen a live orchestra played. But there's an irony about this. After we designed the space, the health and safety people came in and insisted that we put handrails there. Why would you put handrails? It's a lecture theatre. I said, I thought you said it was a staircase. Well, it is sometimes, So we had to build it with handrails and then take them out when they'd gone, Sigh, Some more of that terraced seating. There are those bananas. This one's an interesting one. It's a little transition space between primary and secondary school. Well, they built a space that the children shared together. And they said to the kids, what sort of furniture would you like in that space? They said, we don't know. We've never had a transition space before. But they said, but don't buy the wrong stuff. Don't buy those crap chairs. We'd sooner wait a bit and then we'll tell you what we need. So for 2 terms, they worked in the space with no furniture. They'd sooner do that than have the wrong furniture. Well, look, as we go to coffee on, that place, this is the wonderful reading room in Hellerup, where you just go in to be read stories, one of the few enclosed spaces. This is in Chicago. Look, how many of you have done email in bed? Be honest now, just a quick show of hands. Email in bed? Blimey, everybody, look. Who's not done email in bed? Got a cracking relationship there, I tell you. We all envy you, But for the rest of us, our work and social lives are blurred awfully, haven't they? So why would you have a sort of modal switch in school? Why would you suddenly say, it's time to eat now and stop working. So here, you know, and I love these worlds where every surface is a writing surface. So why wouldn't that extend to the dining and grazing spaces as well? And perhaps as we go to coffee, let me leave you with Yokohama as we go to coffee, because in Yokohama, the kids play in the net above the space they're going to be going to next year. So next year you're going to be in the school below the net. This year you get to play above it. Isn't that just delightful? Look. So just wanted to give you a little gentle heads up on, look, around the world, you know, people are having a real old go at this, you know. Look, I think it's about coffee time, is that right? So we're going to go to coffee. You're going to chat to each other a bit, and then we've got a good block of time to come back and really, let's take the lid off and interrogate this and have a look at some more stuff, you know. So I'll see you in a bit. See you in a bit. Oh, I don't need to do that. Thank you.